Welcome everybody. We're presenting Michael Palmer tonight. We are 4 bee clubs in southeast and central Tennessee. I'm Chip Kelly. I'm with the Tennessee Valley Beekeepers Association. We are joined by the Rhea County Beekeepers Association, the Cumberland County Beekeepers Association, and the Roane Morgan Beekeepers Club in sponsoring these Zoom presentations. We're most fortunate to have Michael Palmer. I think most of you know him. He's from St. Albans, Vermont, and the owner of French Hill Apiaries, or FrenchHillApiaries.com, I believe, in internet parlance. Michael started as a beekeeper in '74, and shortly thereafter, he took on 500 hives from an orchard nearby, and he started to lose hives. And he went and visited, I believe it was Kirk Webster, saw how Kirk Webster was doing and adopted some of his techniques, and he's been just a stellar beekeeper ever since. Specializes in speaking about his sustainable apiary. He raises his own queens, does honey production and everything else, but he did a video on the sustainable apiary several years ago. It's just really taken off on YouTube. He's just one of the most well-known beekeepers around. So without further delay, Michael, if you'll start for us, and thank you for being here.
Sure. So, yep, I want to thank you for having me, and this is a nice way to spend a winter evening. Yeah, we got more than a couple feet of snow on the ground, I guess, and it's been pretty cold, so I'm not in front of the fire, or I put another log on it. But, anyway, so this is a talk about how I raise my queens, and how I try to do it in a sustainable way to support my apiary without having to buy in stock all the time, and replacement bees and replacement queens. So I have to ask, in raising quality queens, is it nature or is it nurture? Queens reared from average stock, but under ideal conditions, will outperform queens reared from the best stock in the world, but under poor conditions. So it's sort of both. So nature would be genetics, breeding. First, I have to select my breeder queens, and you just don't go out in the apiary and pick a queen that because she's cute. You have to have records on these queens, and as beginner breeders, we've only been doing this for, I've been only doing it for 20 years. Maybe you're just starting out, and you might want to keep track of more things than you really need to, and it makes it more confusing. So I recommend that you keep track of the 5 most important selection criteria, and most important to you. So, for me, winter is so long and so severe. I need the bees to have the ability to winter successfully. Come through the winter in a strong condition, ready to expand into the honey flow. I need bees that are hygienic, which means they'll clean up brood diseases like chalk brood. So a hygienic colony of bees is you'll never see a chalk brood mummy. And so if I see a chalk brood mummy in a colony of bees, even though that's an exceptional colony of bees, they're off the breeding list. Temper is very important. You need bees. I need bees to be good tempered, steady on the comb, not runny. They don't follow you around the yard and headbutt, sting. Honey produced is one of the selection criteria that will indicate a lot of the other things that the bees are doing are good. They're able to winter well. They build up properly. They gather honey. They make honey when maybe other colonies in the yard aren't, all things equal. And then, of course, you have to consider how much sugar you fed them during the year. So if a colony of bees made 100 pounds of honey and you fed them 50 pounds of sugar, well, maybe their production was really only 50 pounds. So these are just five just classic things that you take note of. You know, you can add to this, take away from this. But so I found this this yard sheet in Contemporary Brood Rearing, Contemporary Queen Rearing by Harry Laidlaw. And it's not quite like this. So if you look at his book in Contemporary Queen Rearing, you'll see that the columns are individual beehives and the rows are different criteria, right? Different things about the colony that I like to keep track of. Well, if you look at his list, it's just one row after another, you know, how fast the bees enter the supers, how much pollen they have stored in reserve, things like this that, you know, if they produce a really nice honey crop, well, it must be they enter the supers pretty well. Or, you know, if they build up well and they make nice clusters and, you know, they must have enough pollen. So some of those things I cut out of this yard sheet, and I just keep track of things like, so the first category is the queen, and what year, and I can keep track of 4 different years. So I can keep track of the breeder queen, what year she was introduced, what year she was mated, what breeder queen she came from. In subsequent years, if they change their queen, I can note that. And then, of course, if I have to requeen the colony, then all the statistics from this hive get blanked out and we start over again. A population, it's the first time I open the hive in the spring, when I lift the inner cover up the first time in, you know, late March, beginning of April. The population, how many frames of bees there are. Because if I know how many frames of bees there are, then I can judge them with each other, how they build up, how many frames of bees they have when we reverse in a month later or something. The date we reverse the brood chambers, because that matters. That it might take us 2 or 3 weeks to reverse all the production hives I have. And so if a colony that was reversed in the beginning of May might be stronger than, might have less brood actually than a colony that was reversed in the 3rd week of May, just because it's later in the season. So we keep track of the date. In brood, it's, again, it's 3 years I can keep track of, and the amount. So the first square would be the amount of brood, how many frames of brood there are in the colony when we reverse it. And the pattern, you know, we can judge the pattern 1 to 5. If it's an exceptional pattern like you almost never see, that's a 5. And if it's just a horrible pattern, and you know, maybe even not going to make it, that might be a 1. So it's just a judgment call. Any diseases present, especially chalk brood, because I keep track of chalk brood as my hygienic marker. So I definitely keep track of chalk brood. Varroa, you can your Varroa count when you sample and the date, and you can watch the change in population, whether it decreases, stays the same, or increases, or if it increases exponentially. The temper is this bad temper thing is really 3 things. It's the stinginess, how much they sting you, but it's also it's a nervous disorder. So it's runniness on the comb go about their business, or are they running all over the comb and dripping off the bottom of the frame, or are they flighty? When you reach across the hive, do 4 of them peg you on the wrist, or are they bouncing off your veils or following you to the truck, things like that. Honey removed, so we estimate the amount of honey we remove right in the apiary. We don't weigh the supers. We estimate if a super is a medium super is half full, we call it 20 pounds, but we're judging them all the same. So we're really only trying to have a relationship among each other, each colony in the apiary by apiary. And then in October, end of September, we weigh all the beehives. And so we can tell how much they need to be fed, but it also gives you a good way to judge looking for breeder queens. You want a high honey removed number, you know, more than 100 pounds. And you want an October weight, a high October weight, 160, 170 or more pounds. When you have those two things together, those colonies are on the list. So however you do it, there's other yard sheets out there. So however it is you do it, got to keep track of the things that you think are important. And after a while, it'll make sense. It might not make sense in the beginning, but after a few years, it'll start to make sense, and you'll start to see the good colonies come to the top. So now you've got your breeder queens, and you have to manage the breeder queens. You know, how do you, on grafting day, how do you ensure that you have an ample supply of 12-hour-old larvae? You know, you can go through your production hive that's going to be your breeder hive, and you can pull out a frame of mixed brood, frame of eggs and young larvae, and search for the ones that are the right age. You know, I'm doing, I don't know, on grafting day, I'm doing probably 200 grafts. And for me to search through production hives for 12-hour-old larvae isn't going to make it. So I have this this breeder box, 10-frame box. It's got 2 cavities separated by a queen excluder, a vertical queen excluder that's rabbited into the front and back walls, and it goes all the way to the bottom board. And with the bag on top, the lid holds it down against the excluder, and the bees can't cross over the excluder. The queen is in the 3-comb section, and the rest of her colony is in the 6-comb section. And by rotating the combs out and putting empty comb back in the queen section, I can, on grafting day afternoon, I can have an ample supply of perfectly aged larvae. And what I do is, first thing I do is I go to the far side of the excluder from the queen, go to the far wall and pull a comb out. It's nectar, pollen. Pull that out, move the rest of the combs away from the excluder. Go over here to the queen section on the side wall. That would be the oldest brood in the rotation. That would be the oldest brood. That's the brood that's getting ready to emerge. If that brood emerges, the queen will lay there first before she touches your grafting comb. So I remove that comb and put it in the space vacated next to the far side of the excluder, making sure I don't take the queen. I move the 2 remaining combs away from the excluder and put my empty comb in against the queen side of the excluder. And that's 5 days before grafting. Well, it should be 4 days, right? Yeah, well, if you put it in 4 days, and they need to warm it and they need to clean it, and they kind of sometimes get started late. And on grafting day, you don't want to go pull your grafting comb out and have nothing but eggs. So I go a little early, so the center of the pattern might be a little old, but there's just all around the sides, there's plenty of 12-hour-old larvae. And so I do this every 4 days. I'm grafting every 4 days, so I'm changing the comb around every 4 days. So you see what I've done. I've put what was against the far side of the wall. You see now that one goes in this on the far side of the excluder, and another comb gets put in. So that's nature, you know, picking your breeder queens, finding the stock that you want to graft from, you know, finding the good colonies in your apiary. And the next one is nurture. What is nurture? Nurture is all about how the cells were fed, how the cells were fed by the nurse bees. You know, if you want quality queens, they have to be overfed with royal jelly. You have to maximize the amount of royal jelly fed to the larvae. And how do you do that? By maximizing the population of nurse bees within the cell building colony. So you would read Brother Adams' book, Beekeeping at Buckfast Abbey, and turn to the section on how we raise our cells, you'll see how I raise my cells. You know, I've tried other ways. I've never tried the cloak board, but I've used swarm box starters and walkaways, and, you know, seems time after time, I get better queen cells with Brother Adams' method than I did any other way. So you make gigantic cell builders using his method that are so full of bees, they're so full of resources and nurse bees, you just can't help but make good queen cells. So he employs he employs two methods of he combines two methods of queen rearing, of cell building, and he uses the emergency response. The top photograph is emergency cells, started by the bees when something happens to the queen. Queen is removed. The queen is lost somehow. You know, you rolled her when you pulled the comb out, you dropped her in the grass or something. She's gone. And swarming. You know, bees construct swarm cells when resources are at the optimum, and the population is at the optimum, and they make great queen cells, the best queen cells, because all the resources are right. And those together make some really awesome queen cells. So we're going to combine those two methods. So what we're going to do, this is about a 20-day cycle. So day one in the cycle, you know, from day one is set up. The day we set up the cell builders, and so you start with a strong colony. A strong colony to me is 8, 10, 12 frames of brood. So if you see this colony, the bottom three boxes, 2 deeps and a medium, are my standard brood nest. This is the year-round brood nest for me. I believe in having a large brood nest because of our big populations, and because we have such an intense flow. We need more than a single or a brood and a super. We need more room for the bees. Now, before at the end of April, I usually put 2 supers on all my production hives. So this strong colony had 2 medium supers put on it at the end of April, and so here we're in May. I usually start my cell builders, first ones on May 9th every year, and then every 4 days after that. So this is going to be the 9th or the 13th or the 17th or whatever. I separate the two honey supers that are on top of the hive, and I place one of them above a queen excluder. I try not to get brood in there, because the bees are going to raise emergency cells, which then I have to look for. So I prefer not to have any brood, but if both of the supers have brood in them, I don't use queen excluders as a rule, ever, except for cell building. I can make up a super that's all nectar, make sure the queen isn't there. And then on top of that, the green box is a box of emerging brood, harvested from other colonies. A frame of honey at each sidewall, and 7 frames of emerging brood between them. And I harvest that. I mean, you can take it out of production hives, but that's going to, if they're honey production hives and you harvest their brood, they're not going to be honey production. So you're donating these colonies to your cell building operation. Well, what I do is I use what I call brood factories. They're nucleus colonies. Mine are in double boxes, so there's 2 in a box. So you can have singles, it doesn't matter. And I build them up. I overwinter them, let them build up in the spring, let them increase to 3, 4, sometimes 5 supers, 5 stories high, 5 nuke boxes high. And periodically I harvest emerging brood. So right on the other side of this cell building yard are about 17 brood factories. And so I go to the first one, number one, and I pull out a frame or two of brood, whatever it can give me. And I pull out enough so they don't swarm, but not so much they dwindle, not so much they lose their strength and their ability to make me more frames of emerging brood. That's their whole purpose in life, is to make me frames of emerging brood. And I harvest that with the bees, and I put that on top of the honey super and cover it up and walk away. So that's day one. That's the setup day. But now I have to leave them for 10 days. When I graft into my cell builders, I don't want any other larvae in those cell builders. I want the only larvae in that cell builder to be the larvae that I grafted and put into that. I want all the resources of my cell builder to go to my grafts, not to be shared with other larvae in the colony. So that's where that brood the brood is coming from brood factories. Well, I kind of dreamed this up myself. It seemed like a good idea, but then I read about it in Leslie Bill's book about following Brother Columban to Africa to find the Monticola bee, and she mentioned a beekeeper at Buckfast Abbey, Brother Columban, who was Brother Adams' mentor, teacher. And he devised a beehive that would hold 4 nucleus colonies. And then he'd wintered over, and in the springtime, he had excess brood in these nucleus colonies that he could use in the apiary to boost his production hives. Wow, that's exactly what I'm doing with my brood factories. I'm using them in the apiary to harvest brood from and use it in my apiary where I needed it. So this is these are 2 future double nuke boxes of brood factories, 4 nucleus colonies here. You can see how strong they're getting. This is about May, right? This is sometime in May. The grass is growing. I can see some dandelions in the upper right corner. So this must be in May. This must be about May 9th when I first started setting up my cell builders. And, you know, I said, we have to build them up. We have to keep putting more stories on them, more comb, more foundation, let them draw foundation out, keep them moving up all the time. Even though we're pulling out brood, constantly pulling out brood, they keep getting stronger and stronger, and they will swarm. So they'll get 4 and 5 super stories high like this. This is later in the season. Here's 1, 2, 3, there's a 5 story. So these things get massively strong. And the top boxes, of course, they're going to be honey. It's simple. At the end of the year, you're going to get a box or 2 of honey off of them. I winter them in 3s now. So this is, they've been built up. They've been given a 3rd story, and we check them for strength, and they're really getting some nice population, which means they're really cranking out the brood. I took the 2 boxes off the left-hand nuke in that picture. And up on top of the other hive, the left-hand box is the top box, and the right hand is the middle, and then the bottom is still on the hive stand. And I usually harvest the brood from the middle box, and I harvest the brood from what would be against the divider. The divider, these 2 combs right here, and then I replace them with comb. Not foundation, because foundation slows the whole deal down. The reason I pull them out of this box, it's more center of the brood nest, and the 2 combs against the divider are actually the center of the brood nest. Here, not these 2 combs. These 2 combs against the divider. These 2 combs against the divider. This is the center of the brood nest. This is where the queen wants to be working, right in here. So if I pull 1 or 2 combs of brood, I replace it right there. So here's the crew looking for frames of brood, making sure we don't take the queen. Those are the brood factories on the far side of the cell building yard. And so this is emerging brood. This one obviously is going to have eggs and larvae in the middle. I would prefer not to, but sometimes emerging brood is tough to find. You know, you don't want sealed brood that's just in the pointy stage. You know, the beginning of the pupal stage. You don't want them purple eye. Purple eye are going to take too long. When you put emerging brood on your cell builder and leave it for 10 days, a lot of those bees are going to have emerged, and they're going to be ready to do their nursing chores, trying to grow the population of nurse bees. So we've day one, we've harvested the sealed brood, we place it over the queen excluder. And so what have we created? We've created a monster. We've taken a colony that's got 8 or 10 or more frames of brood and given it 7 more frames of emerging brood. So what happens if you take a strong colony of bees that's exploding with population and you put on a box of emerging brood on that and walk away? What do you think is going to happen? Chances are pretty good they might start swarm preparations. Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring these colonies into a condition that they want to swarm, that they're ready to make queen cells. 10 days later, on day 11, it's grafting day. And I split the grafting day up into grafting day morning and grafting day afternoon. So on grafting day morning, remember that colony that I set up with the green box on top with a queen excluder and the super in the green box, which is where I put the brood 10 days ago. There are no more larvae in that. It's all sealed and emerging. I remove that from the hive, from the queen right hive. I slide the queen right hive off the hive stand and turn it around 180 degrees. You can pivot it right on this point, right on the point of the bottom board, and you can turn that big colony right there around in circles if you want, because it's on the point. If you put it on the edge and you try to turn it, it'll rip the bottom board off. So you always turn it on the corners, on the point of the corners. So, and then I put a new bottom board on the hive stand in the original direction, and I put the honey super on the bottom board. I check it for queen cells just to make sure, because if there was any young larvae in there, you know, whenever you separate open brood from a queen with a queen excluder, chances are pretty good they may start emergency cells. It seems like about 25% of the time, the colony is going to start emergency cells. And if those emergency cells are left there and you put a graft in it, when those virgins emerge, they kill all your grafts. So you check that super for queen cells, for emergency cells, and you put what I'm going to call the cell building box on top of the super. Now remember what we had, 2 frames of honey right at the outside walls. I'm going to remove those 2 frames of honey. I'm going to check all the frames of brood for queen cells. Same thing can happen. Emergency cells. You have to rid that colony of any emergency cells. Now, I want to get all the nurse bees, the majority of the nurse bees in the queen right section, into the cell building section. And so how do you do that? You shake them in. These would be swarm cells below the queen excluder in the queen right part, but we'll get to that. It's going to be emergency cells above the queen excluder. Okay, so now I've taken the queen right section of the hive apart and put them all on outer covers. And now I'm going to shake the core of the brood nest through a queen excluder box. On top of the green box is a shaker box with a queen excluder nailed on the bottom. I'm going to harvest the core of the brood nest, the combs of open brood, shaken through the queen excluder so I don't get any queens. I don't get the queen. You leave enough bees, of course, in the hive to take care of the brood and the queen, and you put it back together again. So now this colony, this cell building colony, has got the majority of the nurse bees in the colony, plus they've got the field force. So it's going to make an enormous colony. I put the cell building unit on the new bottom board facing in the original direction. I've taken the queen right apart and shaken the core of the brood nest, the nurse bees, through a queen excluder box into the cell building unit and put the colony back together again. You leave enough bees to take care of the brood. You're only shaking the frames of open brood. And now you have to make sure that you don't leave any queen cells in that cell builder. They're going to hide one. They're going to have a little stumpy thing like this. But if you leave that, it's going to hatch emerge before you pull the cells out, and all your cells will be dead. So, if you have to shake the bees off the combs as you're looking for cells, then do it. Brush the bees off, shake the bees off. Be surprised what's under the bees. Okay, so now I've taken the 2 combs of honey out at the side walls and spread the remaining combs of bees in what brood there is left, and made a 2-space cavity in the middle. And I have to put in a frame of pollen. And the frame of pollen goes in next to where the graft is going to go later this afternoon. So where do you get your pollen from? Well, you can go to beehives and harvest frames of pollen. There's usually pretty good frames of pollen in a strong colony, sometimes not. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to go checking in production hives for frames of pollen. So I make my own frames of pollen by trapping pollen, freezing it, and when I need it, pour it onto a dark worker comb, clean, and rub it in, work it into the cells with my fingertips. And then that's what I give them. That's the pollen comb that I give them. It works very well. I know it's not quite bee bred, but I'll tell you, it works very well. And so that pollen goes in the space created. And this afternoon, I'll put the grafting frame directly next to the pollen on the side where the arrow is, so that the grafts are next to the pollen. Bees don't move pollen around the hive so well, so it's better to have it right next to the grafts. And then we're adding the nurse bees. So this is the colony I've taken apart. And I want to shake the nurse bees into the cell building unit. So this is my shaker box. And you shake the bees in. You put in hot humid, you get a lot of hot humid. In hot humid weather, the bees tend to boil over. And they won't go down, they'll boil over. So what you do is you put a row of duct tape along the top inside edge. And the bees don't like the feel of it or the smell of it or something. And they'll rise up as far as the duct tape and mostly stay below the duct tape. And you can scrape them off or brush them off back onto the excluder. But with just a little a waft of smoke. Don't smoke them hard so that they fly out. Once you get them going down, they'll nascent off. They'll give off the pheromone. They'll say, hey, let's go. This is the way we get back in the house. And most of the bees will go down through the excluder, leaving the drones and the queen or any queens above the excluder. So you can be confident that you didn't shake a queen into your cell builder. So what have we created now? We've created a hopelessly queenless colony. We've taken away the queen. We've added all the nurse bees. I mean, there's so many nurse bees in this thing, it's crazy. And they have no larvae, so they can't make a queen. And gosh, they just go frantic. It's incredible how frantic they get. And they start to nascent off. This is the little nascent off gland. And they do that when they're queenless. They do that when they're lost. They do that when they're trying to call the girls back to the entrance. So in this case, they're doing it because they're frantic. They have no queen. They're calling out to each other. So we've got a great population of young bees. Now grafting day morning is finished. Now we're going to walk away for a couple hours to go do something else. Go have lunch. I don't know. But we make this frantic cell builder. ready to accept a graft. It's incredible how they act. They fly around the apiary aimlessly looking for something. They crawl all over the outside of the hive. They're roaring and nasonophing and whining and crying, and you can hear them. You can just hear how distressed they are. Great, this is exactly what we want. And I give them some one-to-one syrup. I no longer feed until the cells are sealed. I don't think they need that much syrup. The cells are sealed in 5 days. They don't need that much syrup. 1 can of syrup right on grafting day, and that's plenty. It imitates a flow. There may be a flow already, but if all of a sudden you get a bunch of crummy weather, or if there is no flow, or the farmer cuts the fields, or a number of reasons that the flow ended, you want a flow going. So you're imitating that. So then you go away for a couple hours. That's all it takes, a couple hours. They know they're queenless in a couple of hours, surely. And you come back to this grafting, this cell building colony, and this is what you find. There's so many bees in this thing that, you put the grafting comb, the grafting cell bar frame in the space created next to the pollen, and you can let the thing go, and it sort of floats on the bees, and it goes down, down, down a little bit at a time as the bees move out of the way. And you don't even have to worry about dropping it in there. There's so many bees in this thing, and this is what I'm looking for. So we do our graft. It's transferring of larvae from the comb to the cell cups, from the comb that was in my breeder hive that I showed you before. We brush the bees off, take it into the grafting hut, which is my Jeep, and graft. I don't like the graft-free methods. I tried a gentner once, and I got everything all set up, and the queen is in there, and here comes grafting day, and I go check, and there's nothing in it. I mean, there was a couple of eggs. There were no larvae to graft. So, I mean, grafting is, if you got the eyes, or if you have some jeweler loops, my eyes are pretty bad. I only have one. And so it's tough for me to graft anymore, but I'm doing it. If your hands don't shake too bad, there are reasons why you need to use something else. If you don't, I think grafting is much better. You get to do grafting. All the work's been done for your cell bills. You're all ready to put the graft in. You go to the graft, and there's nothing there. It's crazy. So this is my little grafting hut, my fancy old grafting hut. It's pretty nice though. I got tunes. So I kind of like it. I've got a heater if it's cold, and an air conditioner if it's too hot out. I can park in the shade, and I can control the temperature. And so I'm looking for the very youngest. This is not really a grafting comb. I just wanted to show you the size of some of the larvae that you want to graft. For instance, the very top row, about 3 cells over from the right, you see that there's an egg and a larva in that. You see how small that larva is? As soon as that larva is the one next to it to the left, you see that? It's floating on jelly. There's 2 larvae in that one. It's floating on jelly. That's the stage right there. It's just about the size of an egg, or maybe, but it's floating on a little puddle of jelly. Here, this one right here, floating on a little puddle of jelly. This one down here, this one's too old. This one's getting kind of big. This one's definitely too old. It's already white. You want it about 12 hours old. Something like this. So you can see the size of the larva that's on the tip of my grafting tool. Compared to my thumb, compared to a sting spot on my thumb, tiny. That's what you're looking for. But with these grafting tools now, these Chinese grafting tools, plastic grafting tools, what have you, the flexible tip, you never really touch the larva. The flexible tip slides under the puddle of jelly, and you're picking up the puddle of jelly with the larva floating on it. And then when you deposit it in the cup, you're depositing the puddle of jelly with the larva floating on it. So you're never really touching the larva. You don't have to prime the cell because you've already got jelly on the spoon, on the grafting tool. So you spread the frames at the pollen comb, and you insert the grafting. The cell bar frame. There's three bars of 16, so that's 48 grafts per frame. In this case, the number is the breeder number, so that came from breeder 40. So I always keep track of which of the breeder queens that came from. So now grafting day is finished, and you put that graft in there, and you cover it up, put the feeder back on, and it's just watch them. It's incredible how quickly they calm down. It's like you can hear a giant sigh, and all of a sudden they just kind of calm down. They stop nasonoughing. They stop being frantic. They start going back in the hive. It's amazing how fast that happens. So that's the end of grafting day. So now, 5 days after grafting day, the cells are sealed. There's no reason they don't need any more nursing. All they need now is incubating. Now, some people take them back to the shop and incubate them in the shop in an electrical incubator. I don't do that. I leave them on the hive. So I take the cells off the bottom board, being careful not to bump them and tip them and drop them. Put the queen right colony back on the hive stand. Put the queen excluder back on, and put my super and my ripening, my incubating cells back on the queen excluder. And now you can take the feeder off. They don't need any more feed, and you leave them for 5 days to incubate. So in 5 more days, it's day 10 after graft, and that's the day 10 after graft is when you harvest the cells. And these are the kind of cells you get with this method. Great big cells full of jelly. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for quality, and this is the first step of quality, is to have quality queen cells, not little stumpers. It's easy to make stumpers. I mean, anything will make, any little colony will make queen cells, but you need well-provisioned queen cells that have jelly in them on day 10. When you're ready to put them in the mating nukes, they've still got jelly, and they make and queen cells like that make great big pupae. This is starting to get this is day 10, starting to get body color, have eye color. The wing buds are starting to form. This will make an awesome queen as far as size and quality goes. So then 5 days later, which is day 10 after graft, pull the cells, and you put them in the you take them out to the mating yard and you put them in the mating nukes. Then you can come back to the cell building colony and reestablish it as a cell builder. Well, I used to just put another box of brood on top of this whole thing. I stopped doing that because that box that just had the cells taken out of it this morning, the one with 36 on it, that had the cells in it this morning. You can remove that from the colony, put it on a bottom board in a cover, take it to the mating yard, and give it a queen cell. Those bees were crying out for a queen cell. They were crying out for a queen cell, and they had queen cells. And it's full of young bees. There's not much brood left in there, and so you take that out and you give it a cell. And more times than not, I think 2 years ago we got 21 out of 24 accepted that wintered beautifully. So now not only am I with the brood that I harvested from my brood factories, not only am I getting a round of queen cells from that, dual purpose, I'm getting another colony. Now I'm going to reestablish this colony. So first I have to check the colony for queen cells. This time it's for swarm cells. This thing is getting hugely swarmed. They're on a flow. I've been boosting the population like crazy. And so they're going to start swarm cells sometimes. So you have to make sure that there's no swarm cells in this unit before you reestablish it as a cell builder. You also want to check the queen's performance at the same time. You know, sometimes the queens run out of gas. I mean, they're just laying so much brood, and they're going crazy with production, and you'll use them up, and they'll start to fail. And you need a prolific queen in here. If that happens, and you have extra colonies in the apiary, you can just go to another colony and establish that as a cell builder. If you haven't got any additional colonies, you know, if you can catch it in time, you know, when you set it up this second time, you've got 10 days now. If you put brood on it, you got 10 days before graft. You can change the queen right then if you can catch it in time. But usually I just go to a different colony and set that one up and start a different one. Sometimes they will have swarmed. They don't often swarm, because remember, I'm looking at them. I set it up. I check for cells in the colony on setup day. I set it up. 10 days later, right, is grafting day. I take the colony apart. I check for cells again that day. So I'm checking every 10 days. I'm checking these colonies for queen cells. So it's not likely they swarm, but once in a while they do. And so I reestablish it by adding more brood from the brood factories. Start it again. One of the things I found pretty amazing was that after 2 rounds of cell building, so I've done it twice. I've added a total of 14 frames of brood to this colony. Below the queen excluder, I'm finding numbers like 15 frames of brood below the queen excluder. So I don't add brood below the queen excluder. I add brood above the queen excluder. And below the queen excluder are 7 frames of open brood. My goodness, that takes a lot of nurse bees, doesn't it? But yes, I'm growing nurse bees. That's the point. So it makes me wonder if we ever see the true what the queen can actually do, you know. How much could she really do if she had all the resources and all the support staff? So I wonder if we're actually limiting the laying capacity of our queens by limiting her support staff, the number of bees in her colony that can aid in the expansion of her brood nest. I think not. So now I'm on day 10 after graft. The cells are ready, and we take the cells to the mating yard. And as far as mating nukes goes, I mean, you can use any nucleus colony for a mating nuke. You can use standard nucleus colonies, standalone or double nuke boxes like these. You can, but you know, when you start devoting this many resources to mating one queen, that's a lot of resources. And if that queen fails, you've just depopulated this thing. You've just maybe lost it. They'll maybe make emergency cells. Maybe they won't. Maybe that queen won't come back. And then when you have to find a queen in this on 5 big combs, it's difficult. So I don't really use these, but you use what you have. I use 4-ways. This is a 4-way mating nuke box, 10-frame nuke, Langstroth, with a divider, a 5/4 divider going the short way on the box, with a 5/8 by 3/8 frame rest on each side of the divider. And the frames are cut to fit. The top bars are cut to fit, and the top bar and the bottom bar are cut to fit. You buy 2 extra end bars for every frame you buy, so you have 4, so that you can make 2 frames. And it's full depth in my case. And the division board feeder has 2 feed cavities, and there's an entrance on one side for one nuke and an entrance on the other side for the other nuke. They can't communicate between cavities. So when the bag is on and the lid is pushing down, it closes off the feed holes, and they can't cross over. They can't cross around or under. Each one has its own entrance. There's one entrance on each side of the box for one of the nukes. You can move these feeders over and have one of the nukes have, or both have 8 combs instead of 4, but in the mating season, we have them with 4 each. Much easier to find the queens on 4 little combs. It's the same volume as two standard deeps, but they're just in they're cut in half, and they're in more of a cubicle, a cubic configuration, which, you know, like the queen castle, you know, you have got long deep combs, and so the cluster has to be long and skinny. These things form more like a natural cluster, which I like better. And there's more places for the queen to hide out, you know, between frames. With a 2 comb, there's only one seam between two full-size combs. In this way, we have 3, so that I like it better. So then we're out in the yards catching queens. Part of the crew. Some are employees, some are interns. We got a guy that's like, the guy standing up here is a border patrol agent. You know, we live right on the Canada border. So if he's not out catching bad guys out in the woods somewhere, he comes and helps us with catch queens and whatever. He's doing quite well now. He's selling nukes and queens and augmenting his income a little bit. We also can winter them. We also can put them in 2 stories high. I made some of these 10 frame boxes that hold 10 mating nuke combs, and they go right on top of a half lang. So then the colony now has 8 combs in the bottom and 10 in the top. It's a good way to get combs drawn out, get brood made up. They expand into it in the spring, making me lots of combs of brood. Something like this. We also have doubles, 2-way mating nukes. So this is a 2-way mate. There's an entrance at each end of the bottom, and there's a follower board in the middle. So it separates the 2. So that's another configuration we use. The mating yard. This is the main mating yard. We have over 500 mating nukes here, in 4 different groups, and we're catching one group every 4 days, and then the next day giving it queen cells. And a couple of days later, we're in the next group, and we catch that, and the next day we give it queen cells. Sometimes we give the queen cells later the afternoon if we finished early enough. I don't really see much of a difference. I don't really. I get about the same percentage return either way. More of the mating nukes. These guys have a feeder on top of them. I just wanted to show you the configuration and how the mating yard is established. So now we have to catch queens. So 16 days after we give the cell is the day we catch the queens. You know, everything we're doing now is on a 4-day rotation, 4 and 8-day rotation. And so if we're catching queens every 4 days and we have 4 groups, we're back to the group 1 again in 16 days after giving the cell. And at that point, it seems like the queens have been laying for, it looks like they're starting to lay usually on day 11 or 12 after giving the cell. So they have been laying for 4 or 5 days. I know that some people say that, you know, it would be better to at least see sealed brood, or to let them have 1 round of brood before you remove the queen. And I find my queens are pretty good, and I don't really see too much issue with early supersedure or acceptance issues when we use the queens to make nukes or requeen. So sometimes, you know, those queens, they just hide. And so here's one where they can't find her. And so I got 5 people looking for a queen. You know, that's not too profitable actually, you know, but you know, she's probably a runner. So she could be in the feeder, which is one of the reasons I don't like those division board feeders. She could be in the feeder. She could be running around in the box. But you know, we find them. We usually find them. You know, looking difficult. It's there. And we grow a lot of dark queens, and those dark queens are tough to find. When the bees are dark and the queens are dark, wow, it's tough to find them. Kate and Tucka, and Kate's got really good eyes. Tucka does too. They are just fantastic for seeing the queens. They get better eyes than I do. Boy, I'm glad I have them. Well, Kate's still here. Tucka's now in Florida, but we have all kinds of people come here. It's amazing, you know. Erin from Maine. She was the chair of EAS for a number of years. Randy Oliver, you all know Randy. Randy comes, and Sam Comfort, Anarchy Apiaries, and, you know, just lots and lots of people come here. People from all over the world come here on Queen Catching Day. I mean, someday we've had people from, you name it, Australia, New Zealand, and China, Mexico, Canada, England, Ireland, France, you know, US, of course, all over the US. So we have a good time on Queen Catching Day. We try to make it be the fun day of the week, so we can joke around, maybe have a little lunch together. And so you imagine if you had deep combs, full-size frames, packed with bees like this, how difficult it would be to find the queen. I mean, this is a little mini comb, and can you see the queen here? You know, even in this, it's tough to find the queen sometimes. But with the light, the way the light is shining there, I know the first day of queen catching, the next day people come to work and everybody's going, "Oh my God, all I did was see bees all night in my dreams." You know, it just emblazons that shine. So do you see that queen? Some people see that queen right away. And I mean, I've had people out in the audience say, "Yep, there she is, about," yeah, and there she is. Well, there she is. You see her right there. She's one of those darker queens, and they're tough to see. So then my job in catching queens, I'm the official marker and cager. So they bring me the comb with the queen on it. I have a table. I've got my marker. I got cages. I shake bees onto my table for attendance, and I mark the queen and put her in and put the attendants in. They bring me another queen. They bring me another queen. Sometimes they're bringing me queens so fast I have to get help. Have one of the other people come over and put attendants in for me. This is what I use. This is my marking pen. I just use a piece of Timothy and a little bit of paint, and Testor's model paint. I've used the pens. I just can't get along with those pens. They dry out, or they squirt all over, or make a mess. I don't like them. So that's my job. I'm the marker. And so, you know, more people. Liang Peng from Rhode Island. She's from China. She's moved over here now. She and her husband lived in Barrington, I think. There's Kirsten Trainer, was the editor of ABJ. Now, what is it? 2 Million Blossoms. Great magazine she started now. Brilliant woman. And so the whole idea of what we're doing is to try to raise quality, not quantity. I want the biggest, fattest queens I can get. And so by doing what we're doing, we're maximizing the nurse bees, which maximizes the jelly, which gives you great big queens like this. So on the last catch, so we got 4 ways, right? In the last catch, we want to overwinter the mating nukes. I don't want to have to set them up every year. I can overwinter them as nucleus colonies and have plenty of brood and bees in the spring to reestablish the 500 and some whatever it is mating nukes. So what do? So for instance, on the left-hand section, there's 2 queens with a feeder in the middle, and we'll catch the queens. We'll cage one and take her away. We'll cage one briefly and mark her, pull the feeder, move the combs over, put the feeder next to the sidewall, and let the queen go that we just caught, was in the cage, let her go back in the hive. Now, you would think, if you believe everything you hear, that, well, you can't do that because the bees from the other nuke are going to go over and kill that queen because that's not their queen. Well, it doesn't work that way. They don't kill the other queen. You can introduce fresh queens that are just pulled out of a nuke and introduce them into a queenless hive, and they don't even bat an eye. And so we'll unite, we'll do that. We'll have one queen on each side of the divider, and then we'll take another 4-way nuke box and catch all the queens and move the feeders over to the side wall and unite the 2 boxes together. So now we've got 16 combs with 1 queen on each side and 16 combs on the other side. And we winter them that way, and wrap them up and treat them just like a regular hive to winter over. And we have very good success that way. We don't have to have bulk bees in the spring. We don't have to shake bees out of nukes or out of production hives to try to restock 500 mating nukes. So we can either do it this way. This is the way we used to do it, by just wintering them as 2 ways on top of each other. Finally, we just said, well, we don't need all those queens. What are we going to do with those queens in the springtime? There's no time to deal with them. So now we just harvest them at the last catch, which is about the first week of August. And if we don't need them, I can ship them off somewhere. So we have apiaries, wintering apiaries for the mating nukes. We can also winter them with, instead of using 4 ways and making them 2 ways, we can use those 2-way boxes on top like this. So this is the 2 ways that I showed you, and we've united them together by pulling out the divider in the middle and then having one colony, maybe pulling the queen out of that one and putting it on top of the 4 ways that are now 2 ways, and wintering them like that. So we're very successful in wintering these nucleus colonies. They get a piece of styrofoam on top of the bag. We use bags as inner covers, grain bags, seed bags, something like this, which is pretty good. It's hard to have an inner cover, so many different sizes of inner covers. I don't like wooden inner covers on the mating nukes anyway. They sort of tend to get propolized and they figure their way through and they cross over. And so we just use the bags, and then we use the styrofoam on top as insulation. You could use something else. You could use a super with leaves or shavings or straw or wool cloths. I had an old friend that used several layers of wool cloth, something to insulate the top. I don't know if you all need to do this down there. We have to do this up here because everything would be soaking wet if I didn't put some kind of insulation. Also, we need an upper entrance. So we have an upper entrance. See, in the summer when we're making queens, the feeder is here and that plugs the upper entrance hole. But when you move the feeder over to the sidewall, it opens up the entrance hole. And that's their winter entrance. So, a box like this, it's like a double deep. And if you had 2 feet of snow on the ground, it's going to be halfway up the side of the hive. The colony will never get a cleansing flight in the winter because the bottom entrance is plugged with snow and ice. And so they use this not only to vent out the excess moisture, but to use it as an upper entrance. So if a cleansing flight day comes along, they can take it. Very, very important here when they go for 4 months without ever having a cleansing flight. Boy, it's just great to have that 2 or 3 days in February or something that they'll get one. So this is these are the brood factories in the cell building yard. Looks like they're being wintered in 3s and all wrapped up for winter. And so if you have a backyard apiary, how are you going to do this with a small backyard apiary? I realize that, you've only got a few hives. You might have 2 or 10. It's hard to sacrifice anything to donate to a cell building program, to raise a few queens. It gets expensive in brood. So what do you do? So you start a queen rearing project with your local or your state association, and you learn from from better beekeepers in your club on the finer aspects of raising queen cells, and you make nukes. Well, maybe you can't do that. You don't have the resources to make your own. You know, if you had a club association, and you could have a program, and maybe everybody would get some queen cells from the program, but still that's very limiting. And so wouldn't it be great to be able to have local queens from beekeepers that know what they're doing, to have the resource to make you good queens? That'd be what we need, right? Well, how do you support your local queen producers? You know, they find that they don't have any demand in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the main flow. You know, everybody wants their queens in March and April and May, and we can't have queens ready until the middle of June. So nobody wants our queens, right? No, you start teaching people how to raise nucleus colonies, and wintering them. And nucleus colonies are made on the main flow. So here it's mid-June to mid-July. Where you are, maybe it's mid-May to mid-June. But now you've created a demand for queens when the local queen producers can make them for you. You don't have to go to the South. Now, because you've created a demand, now there's some people who step up and start making queens for you. And that's how you change. That's how you change this whole program. Start making nucleus colonies, you start getting local queens raised. Anyway, thank you for listening.
That is awesome, Michael. Thank you very much. One question we had, you want to know if you locate your breeding yards in locations where you can control the drone population, or if you flood the area around your breeding yards with colony of bees that you'd like to perpetuate.
Yes, I have to flood the area. I really can't be isolated. There's just nowhere near enough for me. You know, I don't want to drive to the mountains 2 hours away to catch queens and then 2 hours home. You know, so I flood the area. I have 5 production apiaries surrounding my breeding yard, my mating yard. And I'm doing the best I can to keep my best representatives of my best stock in those 5 apiaries. It's getting more difficult all the time. You know, when I started, I was really the only beekeeper. There was a couple of onesie twosies around. Now everybody and their brother and their cousin wants to have beehives. And the only way they can get beehives is to buy them from out of the area, from down south mostly. And so they bring in this stock and they put it all around my mating yard. And now I'm starting to see a little yellow pop up here and there. When I never had that before, you know. And so I've offered anybody within flight range of my mating yard, please contact me. You know, we have queens. If you're going to buy new bees, you got dead outs like that, talk to me. I've got nucleus colonies with my stock. So trying to keep my drones, and it's difficult. I got an almond pollinator now that's about 3 miles from my mating yard, and it really makes it difficult.
I have a question here. Is queen catching day by invitation only?
Usually people just show up, you know, hey, I'm coming. Is it okay? Yeah, it is, except for this year or last year, you know, because of the virus, you know, we shut it all off. I mean, I had people coming from all over the place. And so we'll see. I got, I'm getting my vaccine in first week of March. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, I'd love to have people come again. And, but we just have to be careful. We're playing it by ear. And if it improves enough, we'll start to have people come back.
Great. Question, how many seasons do you keep your drawn comb?
My drawn comb, probably too many. You know, I bought an awful lot of bees from widows, or from operations that were going out, or from Shazy Orchards, the company I pollinated, I worked for a number of years. And so I know I had combs in there that must have been 50 years old. I found combs with aluminum foundation. So when was that they made those, you know? That was a long time ago. So, you know, we're doing very well. We've got most of them replaced now. Most of those old combs are gone. A lot of my photographs have pictures of old combs, because I took the photographs, you know, early on in the replacement. So now they're looking a lot better now. So when we have a dead out, we put a nuke in a 10 frame to replace a dead out. Well, all those combs in the nukes I have, almost all of them were drawn out last year or the year before. And so with the nuke, and then you put a deep on top of that that's got 4 nice combs in the middle, and 2 foundations on each side, and 2 combs of honey. And they just, it changes over the age of the combs in 1 year. They're in good shape. So yeah, but it's a battle. Wow. Some of the bonfires we've had. Oh my goodness.
Oh, another question. Wanting you to explain reversing your brood boxes.
Okay. So in the spring, the colonies have moved up into the top box of the hive. For instance, in a tree, they'll now be located near the top of the cavity, you know, where the heat is and where the last of the honey is. And then the nectar comes in, and there's no supers on yet. And where does the nectar go? The nectar has to go in the brood combs where the brood is emerging. And so when you have nectar going in combs where there's brood emerging, that sets up a competition between brood rearers and nectar storers. And you know who wins? Nectar storers always win. Well, that's the key, I think. The main trigger for swarming is that backfilling of comb as the brood emerges. So how do we overcome that? Well, first off, we put on honey supers before the flow starts, so that the early flow, for instance, dandelion, has a place to go. It can go above the active brood rearing cluster. So that's the first step, is to get the nectar stored above. And she'll, the queen will, these things showing up. The queen will move up into the bottom honey super. I don't care. I don't use queen excluders on my production hives. So even if she moves up in there, I don't care, because I know later, and when the flow strengthens, that she'll move. I can get her out of the supers by reversing the supers. So okay, so now we've got the supers on. The dandelion comes in. Everything starts to fill up. It recreates that same problem with the top brood box being having nectar go in it. So at that point, with my 3-box configuration, the bottom box is mostly empty comb, pollen, some nectar, mostly empty comb. And so that's when we reverse the brood chambers. We take the supers off. We reverse the brood chambers, looking for queen cells, looking for queen cups with eggs and all that, and removing them if we find any, and if they're young. And so when we put that bottom box that was mostly empty brood comb on top of the brood nest and put the supers back on, maybe with another 2 supers under the first 2 supers, or one under and one over, and you can reverse the brood the supers, so that the one that's got some brood goes back up on top. That eliminates that. It hatches out and they fill it with nectar. Now the queen can move up, and it's that ease of being able to move up that takes away that downward pressure of the incoming nectar. I think that that's the key to swarm prevention, so that you can have really big colonies of bees and they don't swarm because the nectar storers can always go up and put nectar away. The queen feels like she can always move up onto empty comb. So this is what we're trying to do. It doesn't always work. I mean, do I ever have any swarms? Of course I have some, but it's also in conjunction with selection. So you can select for colonies that have a lower propensity to swarm. All bees are not the same. You know, you've seen, for instance, Carniolans versus versus Italians. Okay, Carniolans are just swarm crazy, and I understand the Russians are worse. And so that's genetic. So they have a higher propensity to swarm. Well, you can select for that, but you can't. How do you select for a lower propensity to swarm if you split all your colonies all the time, and that's your default method of swarm control? Splitting a colony, if you're breeding, splitting a colony for swarm control should be the last thing you do if you're trying to find a colonies with a lower propensity to swarm, because the gigantic colonies, they'll show you which ones have a lower propensity to swarm. So with early supering and reversing at the proper time, and making sure you stay ahead of them with supers, you got to stay ahead of them. I imagine you guys with such an early flow, you must have to put a bunch of supers on all at once, not just one or two at a time. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Some may do, but not many.
Right. But then you have small hive beetles. Mm-hmm. So that we don't have small hive beetles unless my almond pollinator friend brings them back from Georgia, you know. So we don't really have, we can use pollen sub, we can put on lots of extra supers and have lots of extra room.
About the pollen sub, when you make your own, not the pollen sub, but when you make your own pollen frame, there was a question, do you rub it into both sides or just the side that goes next to the excluder?
The side that goes next to the grafting frame. Okay. Just one side.
Just one side. Okay. When do you transition from a queenless starter to a queen-right finisher?
My colony is the starter finisher. So I separate, you know.
A starter finisher.
Right. It's the same colony. So on grafting day, I separate the colony. I take the cell building part off. I put the queen right hive behind it, facing backwards, and I put the cell building unit back on the stand facing the original direction. I graft that afternoon, and for 5 days, they're the starter. But they're also the finisher, right? Because I leave them in that position until the cells are sealed. So for 5 days. So now the cells are sealed. A traditional queen right swarm box starter, you only leave it in there until the cells are started. Then you put it in your finisher above a strong hive above a queen excluder, and the colony finishes the cells. My cells are being finished in the cell building unit. Then I put them back on top of the queen right above the queen excluder just to incubate.
Had a question about how you the source for the division board feeders. I believe I've read that you make those yourself.
Correct.
Okay. How do you keep your nurse bees from building wax all over the cells?
I guess just having enough space. I mean, sometimes they do. Not always. Sometimes they do. You can put foundation in and give them something to do. I don't really have too much trouble with it. I don't really attempt to try to, it's worse on a flow, of course. So I don't really, I'm not really too concerned with that.
Do you consider emergency queens from doing a split, say a walk away? Do you consider those to be inferior queens?
I think they can be inferior queens. That doesn't mean they always are inferior queens. You know, it depends who you listen to. I mean, Charlie Mraz used to say that the bees know better than us, and they know which larva to use to make a queen from. Well, and they make all their splits. The Mrazes do with walkaways. Well, I think that that the bees do start emergency cells from a wide range of ages of the larvae, and so they'll start cells from very young larvae and some that are a little older, and it's which ones emerge first. It's the ones that were started from an older larva emerge first. So if you're going to do walkaways, I would suggest going into the colony at 5 days when there are sealed emergency cells and unsealed emergency cells, and just remove the sealed emergency cells. And now you have the cells that are left were cells made with young larvae. That's the theory anyway. Have I ever done any studies? No, I haven't. I've done walkaway a few times. I thought the results were miserable. I'd rather use my own queen cells.
Someone's asking if you use the green drone frames. I believe I heard you say you do. They want to know.
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
When I have used drone foundation, it's just been wax, drone wax foundation, which I've just installed and put a couple of horizontal wires in.
Okay.
My combs have plenty of drone. I have plenty of drone comb on my combs. I don't rogue out everything that's got any drone in it. So there's plenty of drones. Think about how many colonies. I got 5 apiaries. I've got over 100 colonies surrounding my mating yard.
There was a question related to your mating yard. How far away is the mating yard from the other yards?
Anywhere from a half a mile to 2 miles.
Someone is asking why you don't use a pallet setup.
I don't like working bees on pallets. I pollinated apples for 20 years, and at the end, the last number of years, we had them on pallets, and we even got the orchard to move them. We used to move 600 hives by hand, and so we put them on pallets, and the orchard moved them. But then now you got to work them on pallets, and I like to work front and back. I like to be able to reach down in there and tip the hive back and check it. You can't. I mean, it's just inconvenient. I got rid of all my pallets. I sold all my pallets cheap so I would never pollinate again. It's done. I'm done with that noise. It's terrible on the bees. It's really hard on the bees.
If I didn't know better, I'm getting the idea you don't want to pollinate.
No.
Someone's asking if when you run into that emergency cell in your starter, do you try to salvage it or you just call it?
I just get rid of it.
Okay.
I've got enough cells. I get 100 and something cells coming out every 4 days. I don't need to bother with that.
You drew heavily from Brother Adam. Do you employ buckfast bees in your apiary?
I did.
What breeds are you usually running?
I did have buckfast bees back when tracheomite started making the rounds and really killing a bunch of beehives. Jeez, it was terrible. I don't know if you were around at that point, but you go down the rows in the springtime and any of the yellow bees were dead and any of the dark bees were alive. I mean, I had starlines for a long time. If you know what starlines were, it was a hybrid Italian from York Bee Company in Jessup, Georgia, and boy, the tracheomites just wiped them out. But it was shown that buckfast bees were quite resistant to tracheomites. And so for a number of years, I bought buckfasts from weavers, from our weaver, and gosh, they were very resistant to tracheomites. I found they had a problem with chalk brood though, so I got some hygienic carniolans out of California, and that cleaned up the chalk brood in a month. You could not find a mummy. That was amazing. That was such an eye opener about what you could do with breeding, you know. And then because of that, we were able to start selecting for good colonies in the spring, and tracheomite became a thing of the past. No problems anymore. Now, you can't really get buckfast anymore. I wish we could. There's breeders in Europe. I know breeders in the UK and in Denmark and other places that have pedigrees going back decades on their queens and who they were mated with. It's just like a family tree going back decades. And what do we have here? Well, yeah, that came from hive number 4 over there, and I've had her for 3 years, and like, well, I don't really know where that came from before that. And like, you know, there's nothing. We've got no pedigree at all. I don't know if anybody keeps a pedigree list of where their stock came from. Perhaps Kobe does, but it's, you know, that's her thing. It's not advertised that I can ever see.
Ancestry.com for buckfast bees.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think I can answer this one. Why would you not want to use pollen substitute for making that pollen frame?
Well, I mean, hands down, pollen has to be better than pollen sub.
Right.
I've run out of pollen and mixed it half and half with pollen sub, and it seemed to be okay. But if I can give pure pollen, I'm going to give pure pollen, and I can gather all the pollen I need. I can gather 100 pounds of pollen in a few weeks in the spring when the pollen flows are real nice and varied, you know, nice varied kind of pollen. So that's really all I need. I just gather a big bag of it and put it in my freezer and use it when I need it.
Use for foundation?
Almost forever I've used wired wax. And I was pretty stubborn about that. Wired wax and wired the frames and all. And, you know, sometimes when the flow isn't great, you put the foundation in and the bees chew the heck out of it. And they chew all the wax off the wires, and it gets messed up by mice, and it gets, you know, so Jack at Better Bee is a good friend of mine. And he said, Mike, why don't you just try this? He gave me some acorn foundation that was heavily waxed.
Yes.
I put it in. I was surprised. I really, because I had Pierco for a number of years. I bought thousands of Piercos, and I'm almost got them all out of my operation now. They're almost all gone. And I would never, with plastic frames, you know, terrible things. But this acorn is better. The imprint is better. I like it better than, and it's more durable than the wax. So whereas I prefer wax, I'm now using plastic, but we're buying it unwaxed. And I set up an old Maxant bottling tank with a 5,000 watt heater in it. And we fill it up about half with water and about 6 or 8 inches of wax on top, get it up to 190 and dip the sheets in it. And just dip it right in and knock off the extra inside the tank. And you wind up with 1/10 of a pound of wax per sheet. Wax foundation is 7 sheets to the pound. Dipped wax plastic is 10 sheets to the pound. Not bad. That's pretty close. And I think they do great on it. So that's what I'm using now.
Awesome. We're fans of the acorn triple waxed here.
Yeah, and what's his name there? He's a pretty nice guy. Nick.
Yeah.
Nick is pretty cool. I mean, Nick, we can have good talks about. He went to Mexico, and we talk for hours. I mean, I like his product.
What would you consider your dominant strain of bees?
Carniolan.
As far as Carniolans?
Sure. But they're hybrids, of course.
Right. To increase the supply of comb, would you add a super foundation above or below the super of comb?
Yeah, if you're talking about honey supers, and you got a good strong hive that's dripping and ready to have a super of foundation, I do put those under the other supers, or at least under all but one. Maybe have one full one on the brood nest, then a super of foundation, and then the rest of the supers. So the closer you can get that to the brood nest, the faster they're going to draw it out. In nucleus colonies, if you have nucleus colonies and you put a good strong nuke that's expanding and you put a box of foundation on top, they don't always go draw it out. They'll swarm first because they don't see overhead foundation as expansion room. And so some of them will swarm. And so rather I put a mix, I make a mix of it. So if I'm putting a 2-story nuke, say, I'll put in, I'll take, and I want to put a third on it. I'll take the two combs of brood against the divider away and put 2 foundations there. Put the third box on empty. Put the two frames of brood against the divider and 2 foundations against the sidewall. And now you've got a zigzag effect where you've got brood next to foundation and foundation above and next to brood. And because it's there and it violates the bee space and it's right next to them, they just start to draw it out right away. And so you really get some good comb that way.
Someone's asking about the availability of, I believe you said your hive inspection sheet was from Laidlaw's book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of anyone who reproduces that?
Reproduces it? No, I just have to get it, copy it out of the book, I guess.
Okay. Or
you can, this is being recorded. And if you want to copy the picture, copy and paste it to your wherever, you can go right for it.
Someone's asking about if you buy cell cups or make your own wax. I think you were using.
I do. I use JCBZ base mount.
JCBZ.
Mm. I don't put them in the hive to warm them before grafting. I take them out of the bag and put them in the bars and graft. And I have, out of 48, I'm usually 45, 46.
What's your go-to for mite treatment? How many times a year do you treat?
Probably not enough. Yeah, I guess the only thing that works for me consistently is something with Amitraz in it. I've tried everything. I mean, I've tried the vapors and I've tried the acids, and I just don't get good enough control. I wish breeding was as easy as with tracheal mites. Gosh, tracheal mites was a cinch. This varroa mite thing is ridiculous. It's 30 years now.
Yeah, there were reports of tracheal mites in Tennessee last year, but I believe it was false.
They do have they might have a spike every once in a while, but nothing like what it was.
Do you think that over-supering is effective for preventing swarms?
Over-super, I mean putting too many supers on.
Well, no, I think in versus under-supering.
Oh, just putting the empty super on top of the stack.
Mm-hmm.
I usually, if you're ahead of them in supers, so they haven't got behind and they're plugging the brood nest already. I think that over-supering is great. They're not going to swarm. It seems like when the bees are making honey, they're not really thinking about swarming, as long as they have enough place to put the nectar. It takes 2 supers of nectar, to make storage room, to make 1 super of honey, because there's so much volume in nectar. And so if you're putting on 1 super at a time and waiting for it to be 3/4 full before you put another one on, which seems to be the standard method of teaching people, that's, for me in my area, that's way too late. We put on 2 at a time. We'll put on 2, maybe we put on 2 at a time, maybe 3 times even, and have 6. We can't fool around with 1 at a time. But over-supering, yeah, I think that over-supering works great. Now, if you're behind and they're plugging the brood nest and they might have cells started, or they're really plugged and everything is dripping, perhaps then is under-supering, because you're behind them and you need to give them empty space right in the middle of their nest. So it's really dependent on the circumstance, I guess.
Back to your pollen frame, granted that pollen sub is inferior, would it still work in a pinch?
Of course, as I said, I've used it before in a pinch. Mixed it half and half, or some part with pollen and some part of pollen sub, and rubbed it into the comb, and I thought it worked reasonably well. I've never tried pure pollen sub.
With regard to grafting, when is too late and when is too early to start?
In what way?
Let me just read the question. When is too late to graft queens and when is too early to start? Our goal is to raise our own queens for requeening our own hives in the fall.
So here, I like to do my requeening in July after we're finished making nucleus colonies. So then we always have 3 more weeks or so, 2 to 3 more weeks of queen catching. So we have a good number of queens to come out, and that's when we do our requeening. Because I like to do my requeening on a flow, but I don't like to wait till the August flow, the goldenrod flow, because then if anything messes up, you're screwed. So we like to do it in July, second half of July. And so if you're going, say you're going for, say you're going to go middle of June because that's your, or say the beginning of July. So let's see, what is it? For the way I do it, it takes 20 days to get a queen cell and 16 more days to get a mated queen out of it. So you're talking 36 days. So you're talking more than a month. So you need to start, when you want to requeen? And you're going to need to start at least a month before that. So yeah, you could. What I mean, if you start too early, if you're going to requeen in the fall, if you start too early, what are you going to do with the queens in the meantime? You can make nukes out of them and requeen with nukes. So you got to plan back from when you want to do your requeening back far enough so that you have mated queens available when you're going to requeen. I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't wait till the fall flow. I don't know your flows, but I would, for here, I would not wait till the fall flow.
The fall flow may hit or it may not. It's
that's the thing. And everything is so much easier when there's a flow. Requeening hives in when there's no flow, it's tough.
There's such a queen industry in the South and in Florida. Flip that around. What are your thoughts about buying a queen from a colder climate and putting it in a hive in the South? Would it perform just as well, better, worse?
I think that they perform according to where they were. Now, you know, our bees are such hybrids now. They're so mixed up that it's not quite as noticeable maybe in some of the stocks that you have, that you could take them anywhere. But for instance, so since I spend so much time with Mexican beekeepers and teaching there too, and they all want to try my queens, so it's magically I send a bunch of queens to El Paso, and somehow they wind up in Michoacan and Oaxaca and and Veracruz and like that. And they really give it a good test. And they say, Michael, your bees are too slow. You're too slow for us. You know, we need these big Italian colonies, and they build up fast and make all these bees and like that. I can see that. So yeah, there is a difference, you know. But you know, like, gosh, I ship bees from the south to the north and the east and the west and Alaska and everywhere, and people invariably say, geez, I really like your bees, but shipping them to Mexico where it's really different, they noticed.
Mexico is kind of tropical.
Well, parts of it are tropical and parts of it are desert, so it's all different. Mexico's huge.
Well, how would you flood the drone population in a tropical area?
Well, you either have drone mother colonies surrounding your mating yard. You have to flood the area. I mean, if I was down in the tropics, like in Mexico, I think the apiaries are far enough apart, so you're not getting, you know, so you can have some kind of an isolated mating yard. Except don't forget, you know, they have Africans there. And so the Africans are swarming and making feral colonies all the time and sending out drones and sending out usurpation swarms. And, you know, so boy, I don't know, that'd be difficult. You'd have to be in your bees all the time, making sure they didn't get usurped or anything like that. I've been in a number of apiaries there. and the bees are definitely Africanized. I mean, the cells are teeny tiny little cells. I've never seen anything like that. Just very small, you know, I guess classic small cell comb. So there's Africans there. These people are working to grow their own queens. I was in an apiary where this guy's bees were the most beautiful bees I've seen there. And so he's using an isolated mating yard, and he's running cell builders the way I am, and he's doing very well. But I've also seen ones that are not doing well. Most every other apiary I've been there has had real severe parasitic mite syndrome with tiny cells. So this is small cell bees with issues with varroa mites. We did a sample. We inspected some bees. I could tell right away that this colony had issues with all the PMS brood, and so we did a sample, and they'd never seen an alcohol wash. We did an alcohol wash, and the poor colony had 97 mites in the alcohol wash. You know, and they were telling me, well, you know, the PMS brood, the brood they're pulling out, it's Barroa, senor. It's the winter. You know, this is what they do in the winter, and they're, you know, they have no resources and like that. And then we washed the bees, and they looked at those mites, and they went, what the heck? So mites are a problem everywhere. Oh my God.
Michael, that wraps up the questions. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this evening.
Sure, I appreciate it. Hey, couple of hi-os. Steve, hey Steve, how's it going? Yeah, and Michael Menino, you made me that bee box, right? Cool, that was a cool one. Like, folks, I wish I had a picture of that bee box. Yeah, that's pretty nice. It's carved with it. Yeah, really. It says Queen Martha on it. If you know the joke, it's pretty funny.
I know that joke.
I love it. I love it. That's a great thing. Yes, I'll be sending you some queens, Mike.
Next month we're having Dan Conlon, One Colored Apiaries. Do you know him?
Oh yeah, I know Dan. He's a Russian breeder. He might even be the head of the Russian bee breeding program. Yep.
He is.
Yep.
He is. I'll send you a link if you have time to
sure.
sit in, or if you care to.
If I do, if I'm not doing another one, I only got about 12 more to do now before the 1st of April. So it's been busy.
Do them while you can. I know we wanted you earlier. You were quite busy with your own beekeeping, and it's.
Right. I really can't do anything in, say between April and October. It's tough. You know, it's
right.
So busy all the time, and I don't have the energy I used to have. I hate to say it. I was 72 on Sunday, so
happy birthday.
I'm getting up there. Yes. Hey, do we have anybody from overseas here?
I saw someone earlier from Germany, I believe.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I lost my chat box. I think there was somebody from South America.
Oh yeah, nice. You all going to Apiamundia in Chile in 2023? Be there or be square. It's going to be an awesome meeting. I think it's going to be awesome.
Hi from the UK.
Okay.
Hi there.
We've dropped a lot of people from when we started the Q&A, but we were at 300, and the biggest number I saw on Facebook was 256. So we were close to 600 people there at one time.
Wow, that's something, huh?
Yes. Well, you get a guy full of knowledge, and people flock to him. So
good. Well,
thank you.
We also had a Portugal in the chat, and I think we had another UK. They didn't specify more than that, but nice. Another UK and a Portugal.
Yeah. Nice. I did a couple the other day with the Mexicans, and I translated the text into Spanish best as I could, with Google Translate. Google Translate doesn't know never heard of chalkboard before, so they don't.
Technical terms.
But that went well. I have an interpreter, so my buddy Aurelio, so it worked out pretty well. But it's the first time I ever did a presentation with English subtitles. So I knew what I was talking about.
Oh, well. Well, the chat box is just full of thank yous. I had to fight through all the thank yous and great presentations just to find the questions. So,
Yep. Well,
just know
thank you
you're
all very much.
Appreciated.
Yep.
All right. That will conclude the program, and we hope to see you back next month with Dan Conlon. The details are on Facebook. And again, Mike.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Well, take care now.
Really appreciate it.
Yep. You take care. Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.